Stand-up comic, political commentator, and host of the show The Patriot Act, Hasan Minhaj, has found himself in an ethical controversy about allegedly lying about very sensitive topics in the jokes he's told. Like this story about an undercover FBI agent who allegedly infiltrated Minhaj's local mosque in 2002 in the wake of the 9/11 attacks.
I was 16 years old, it's 2002, I'll never forget this. So I'm a junior, and during fourth period, my dad pulls me out of school, and he takes me to Friday prayer, and I'm in the back of the mosque, and in the middle of the sermon, this super ripped white guy shows up to the mosque. Just bald, all trap, no neck, barbed wire tattoo. Dude, he looked roided out. He's just like, hi, I'm Brother Eric. I'm here to convert to Islam. And my dad's like, Hasan, you see that? It's a miracle. That's the power of Islam. Eric, blue eyes, strong. He wants to be a Muslim. I'm like, Dad, Eric is a federal agent.
In an interview with The New Yorker, Claire Malone confronts Minhaj about onstage stories that she was unable to verify, with Minhaj defending his statements as emotional truths and stating that the punchline is worth the fictionalized premise. Unverified stories Malone discovered include an anthrax poisoning scare for Minhaj and his family, the comedian's scary visit to the Saudi embassy in the US, and a rejection he received from a prom date fueled by the date's racist parents. Some comedians are coming to his defense.
That's what we do. We tell stories and then we embellish them.
And Ismail Lutfi, who worked as a writer for the Patriot Act, also defended Minhaj on his FBI informant joke, with the perspective that it shares a story that speaks to the fears that many Muslim Americans felt across the country in the years following 9/11. Critics, though, are claiming that the kind of lies that Minhaj has admitted to passing off as truths in his most recent stand-up specials went farther than what is typically accepted in comedy.
Comedians make up stories all the time.
That's true. Now, usually we do it to make things funnier.
Yeah.
Not make things more racist or sad.
Yeah.
Or emotional.
Yeah.
And I think that's the tricky thing here with like in his stories, it's not like he was using these exaggerations or hyperbole as punchlines. He was using them to kind of make the audience feel worse about him. And then it turns out these things didn't actually happen.
In a statement on the matter to Variety, Minhaj said, "All my stand-up stories are based on events that happened to me. Yes, I was rejected from going to prom because of my race. Yes, a letter with powder was sent to my apartment that almost harmed my daughter. Yes, I had an interaction with law enforcement during the War on Terror." But Minhaj's career is not only focused on stand-up comedy. Political commentary has also been a significant part of his work. The trailer for his political comedy news show, Patriot Act, states,
Patriot Act is a comedy show that tackles the news with depth and nuance.
While it's no big secret that embellishing details about a story on stage is an integral part of joke writing for stand-up comics,
I do sometimes lie up here.
it is harder to tell where the line is between comedy and news that has a comedic slant. One of the top 3 contenders to replace Trevor Noah as host of The Daily Show, Minhaj's recent work has both served a political purpose and a comedic one, a career that, like many of Hasan's contemporaries, draws inspiration from comedian-turned-commentator legend Jon Stewart. And also like Stewart, Hasan has been invited to testify before Congress, speaking to the House Financial Services Committee about the student debt crisis in 2019. Here's his testimony.
I want to thank Chairwoman Maxine Waters for the opportunity to testify. And I would like to thank Ranking Member Patrick McHenry for taking the time to Google who I am.
Cute. Very
My
cute.
name is Hasan Minhaj. I'm a Muslim, and I condemn radical Islamic terrorism. That has nothing to do with anything. I just want that on the record. It's good to get ahead of these things. Now, Chairwoman Waters invited me here today because I host a political comedy show on Netflix called Patriot Act, which means I may owe some of you guys royalties. Just DM, we can talk later. Now, we recently did an episode on the student loan crisis, and it really hit home with our audience because 44 million Americans owe more than $1.6 trillion of student loan debt. In fact, the day we shot our episode, we polled our studio audience. It was only about 200 people. In that room alone, had over $6 million of student loan debt. Now, granted, our audience is mainly unemployed poli-sci majors, but that's still a lot of money. Now, this issue is sidelining millions of Americans. People are putting off marriage, kids, home ownership, and retirement, especially my generation. So I'm 33, and growing up, it was drilled into our heads, you gotta go to college if you want a middle-class job. And we even tell kids today, look, if you don't go to college, you might as well get a face tattoo. And then they point to Post Malone, and we're like, okay, that's one guy. He's a very popular musician. But it's true, 2/3 of all jobs in America require at least some college. This is the standard now. And that wasn't the case when most members of this committee were in school. And you paid far less for your degrees. That's not speculation. We looked up where the 60 members of this committee went to college and what your school's tuition was at that time. Even adjusting for inflation, college cost way less across the board. So, Chairwoman Maxine Waters, your tuition at Cal State LA in 1971 was the equivalent of about $1,000 a year. Today, Cal State costs well over $6,000. That's more than a 500% jump. Congressman King, right? In 1965, Congressman King paid the equivalent of almost $10,000 a year at St. Francis College. Today, St. Francis costs over $25,000. On average, this entire committee graduated from college 33 years ago and paid an inflation-adjusted tuition of $11,690 a year. Today, the average tuition at all of your same schools is almost $25,000. That's a 110% increase over a period of time when wages have gone up only 16%. So people aren't making more money, and college is objectively way more expensive. Do you see what's happened? We've put up a paywall to the middle class. And if there's one thing Americans don't deserve more of, it's paywalls. That's why we put up our entire show for free on YouTube. It's also because you can't really find anything on Netflix. It's like the lost and found bin of entertainment. You're like, great, another show about people who love cake. Now, despite these numbers, you often hear the idea, these kids wouldn't be in trouble if they just took some responsibility. But they're trying to be responsible. They're investing in education, and they are trying to pay their loans back. And yet many borrowers are still treated like deadbeats because the government has put their financial futures in the hands of predatory, for-profit loan servicing companies. Companies like Navient and other companies you will hear from today have a history of misleading borrowers and pushing them into repayment plans that in some cases have cost individual borrowers tens of thousands of dollars in unnecessary interest. And the worst part is, borrowers don't even get to choose their loan servicer. The Department of Education chooses for you. So there's no competition that makes these companies provide better service. Now look, we know the deck is stacked against student borrowers in ways that it wasn't 10 or even 15 years ago. And they deserve some basic protections. Americans should not have to go bankrupt pursuing higher education, and they should never be preyed upon by underregulated loan servicing companies. So members of this committee, we know the government is capable of stepping in during a financial crisis. So really all I'm asking today is, why can't we treat our student borrowers the way we treat our banks? Because 44 million Americans, that is too big to fail. Thank you so much for your time, and I will now go back to where I came from.